Good afternoon. This is David Shedd from EasternSlopes.com, and I'm here with my cup of cocoa since it's winter and nice winter afternoon. It's not really that appropriate to have coffee or tea. To show you how to set up and use the MSR Speedlock binding. This is a fascinating binding because it's the only binding we've ever had where when we got these snowshoes in, passed them around to different testers, half of the testers loved them and half of them absolutely hated them. So we had to spend a little time watching people use them before we figured out exactly what the problem was. And to a certain extent, the problem is the instruction manual. This often happens. Some instruction manuals are more easily read than others. Let me describe the binding first. It's an unusual one because it uses a single strap on the front for most of what you do with it, and a single rear strap, and that's it. And you don't even set the strap when you're going to use it. You set it in advance so that when you're ready to use the snowshoe, you step into it, you put on the rear strap, and you go. If you're doing very serious backcountry work, particularly if you're carrying a backpack, heavy backpack, and you want a little more stability and support for side hill work, there is an instep strap, and it's on this one right now, you can see, that comes on and off very easily so that you can add extra support. But for most people, most of the time, you don't even need it. The binding is that stable by itself. In addition, these bindings have another advantage, which is, and it's very difficult to see in something like this in a video, but this little pin here, and when you lift that pin, this whole binding rotates on a table underneath. So you can pop it up, and you can change the angle of the snowshoe relative to the angle of the binding. Now you might ask, why is that important? Some people are pigeon-toed and walk with their toes together. Some people are what we call duck walkers and walk with their toes pointed out. If you walk with your toes pointed toward each other, which is probably the more common of the two, what happens is you step forward, and the toe of your snowshoe, of course, hits the toe of the other snowshoe, and you tend to go face first. Not that much fun, and that leads to people who are pigeon-toed having to put their feet very wide, which is very uncomfortable and very difficult, particularly on the inner thighs. For duck walkers, the reverse happens. You step, and you tend to have the tail hitting your other snowshoe. You're a little less likely to fall forward, you're a little more likely to fall back or sideways. It's still not fun. What this allows you to do is set it up so that the snowshoe is facing directly forward, regardless of where your feet are, and once it's set once for the particular user, it doesn't have to be changed again. It's a great innovation, works extremely well, as long as you can get the basic binding to work. Now, here's the problem with the instructions. I'll pull it out, and I hope you'll be able to see it. But this strap right here is centered. You look about at this point of it, and the strap is at an angle to the binding, and we'll talk in a second about why it's that way, directly over the pivot point of the binding, over the crampon area. And the way you want to be is the ball of, with any snowshoe, is the ball of your foot is over that pivot point. So, I'm going to hope that you can read this, and it's a little difficult to see, but what we found out is, depending on the user, if the user is the kind of person who reads instructions, they did fine with this. If it's the kind of person who uses photographs or pictures, those people had problems. The description says, align ball of foot over crampon hinge. That's great, and that's exactly what you need to do, the ball of foot over that pivot point. But if you look at the diagram, you'll see that, and particularly when you get into at the trailhead, that strap isn't over the ball of the foot. The ball of the foot is much farther back. That strap is way up on the toe area. So we had people who aligned them to the toe, and it just flat out didn't work. So here's how you use it. The description says that you open this hinge up entirely, pop it open, take your boot, and put it in. And one of the reasons why, by the way, you need to do it with the specific boot you're going to use as opposed to trying to set it for a particular size is, here are two boots. This is a Loa Arona, nice Gore-Tex light winter boot. Columbia Bugaboot, classic. You know, virtually all of us either own a pair or have owned a pair. There's a little snow off them. These are both size 40 Euro or 8.5 women's. And if you look at them, you know, look at the toe box difference. If you set that binding up for this one, you wouldn't even be able to get that into it. If you set the binding up for the Columbia, the Loa will slide in and just flop around in there, and the snowshoe will flop. So you definitely have to set it up for the specific boots you're going to use, as opposed to just, oh, I'm the user, so I'm going to set it up for these boots and then use a different pair when I go in there. So, what they say to do is open this hinge entirely. There's a little mark right here that you can't really see, but if you were looking at it, you would know it. And you put your foot in, align it so that the ball of your foot is over that crampon hinge, wrap the strap over it, look at the number that matches up here, and let's say it's an 8. Then the instructions say to pull your boot out, drop down 2 numbers. So if this was an 8, you drop from an 8 to a 6. And then tighten the hinge up, slide this together, and once this is together, it's just rock solid. It doesn't move, it doesn't slide apart because it uses saw-shaped teeth that hold it together. And then go to the trailhead. What we found was, if you did drop it down a full number 2, you ended up with exactly the problem we talked about, which is you could only get your toe in. And when you only get the toe in, the toe box of a boot has a curve down to it. And so if you can only get the toe in, and then you put it in here and twist, it didn't tighten down, and the binding remained sloppy. What we found was better was, if you came up with that 8, was to drop it down to maybe a 7. Try a 7 first. Just drop it down 1 number. And then you'd slide your foot in, and when you put your foot in and kick it in at the trailhead, that would go in deep enough that instead of sitting on the toe area here, it would go up like this to the crampon area, so the ball of the foot is aligned over the crampon, and then when you twist your foot, this binding, this strap, tightens up. If we went less than that, then this would go too high up and come up into the instep area and become painful. So it's one of those things that when you do set it up, you have to play around for yourself. You need to have this, once you set it up, so that when you kick in, you can get into that wide area of your foot, to the ball of your foot, but not so loose that you get up into the instep. Because if you do, you're not going to enjoy using them day in, day out, or for a long trip. So, end result is this one's set up for my foot. Get to the trailhead, step in, kick in like that. You can see my foot is directly, when I step over, I'm right over that. And then all I have to do is take the strap, hook like this, tighten it down, pop that on, keep the strap from getting in my way, and yeah, sometimes that's a pain. There. And I'm ready to go. And you can see, my foot doesn't move around on there, 1/4 inch maximum. Again, if I'm going to, this one has the center strap, the instep strap on it. If you do decide to use this, don't tighten it up too much. There again, same problem mentioned before. If you get this up into the instep area, it'll become painful. It's very easy to, oh, I should tighten that down a lot. You don't really need to. Just snug it down a little bit, and it's ready to go. And if you do that, and use the binding this way, you'll find that it's stable, it flexes very easily, it's a beautiful pivot point so that you don't have any problems with the tail wanting to come up and flip snow onto your back. And they're a great backcountry shoe and one of the easiest bindings to use. So remember, with these, the key is to set this toe strap up so that when you are at the trailhead and you kick your foot in and wiggle it around a little bit, that the ball of your foot is directly over that pivot point that shows right there. And if you do that, you'll have no problems with these bindings. It's a great snowshoe, and you can go out there and just plain have a ball. Hope this is helpful. Happy trails.